"We're orphans. Please don't close the door," the girl cried, planting both hands against the mission house as Elias Vane pulled it inward against the wind. Rain hissed over the adobe yard. The mission sign banged on one chain. Behind the girl stood a thin boy and a little one wrapped in a flour sack shawl. All three shaking under the lightning, like they'd walked clear across the territory for that door. Elias kept one hand on the latch and the other on the mission key. He had come to lock the place for good. Father Tobin was dead. The council had closed the orphan room, and banker Harlan Creed wanted the building emptied by sunrise. Elias told himself none of it belonged to him. Then the little girl coughed, a dry, tearing sound that brought the smell of old smoke back into his throat. "Who sent you here?" he asked. The older girl lifted her chin, though rain streamed off her lashes. "No one sent us. They said this was where children without kin could stay." Her voice shook once, then steadied. "Please, mister, we only need one night." The boy looked over his shoulder toward the dark road. That frightened Elias more than the rain. A child who watched the road like that had reason. He stepped aside. They slipped past him into a room that smelled of damp boards, candle wax, and old ashes. Wind worried the shutters. A black stove, 2 cots, and a shelf of chipped bowls were all the mission had left. Elias barred the door and set the lantern high. In the yellow light, the children seemed smaller. The eldest might have been 13, maybe 14 if hardship had not sharpened her face. The boy was 9 or 10. The little one, no more than 6, clutched a wooden horse with one missing leg. "Names," Elias said. "Ruth," the girl answered. She touched the boy's shoulder. "Micah." Then she laid a hand on the little one's hair. "Anne, family?" "Gone, cholera first. Then the wagon camp burned outside Messiah." She said it flat like a fact worn smooth by repetition. Burned. The lantern flame narrowed in Elias's sight. For a heartbeat he heard another storm, another crackle, another door jammed by heat while children screamed behind it. He put the key down too hard on the table. Metal rang. Anne flinched. He cursed himself for it. "Sit by the stove," he muttered. Micah wood. Ruth kettle. The little one gets broth if there's any left. Ruth moved at once, careful and watchful, as if kindness might vanish if she stared at it too long. Micah fed the stove. Anne sat on a cot with both fists around the broken horse, never taking her eyes off Elias. "What happened on the road?" he asked. Micah glanced to Ruth. She gave the smallest shake of her head. That was answer enough. Elias found onions, hard bread, 2 carrots, and a heel of salt pork. He sliced and stirred while the storm drummed overhead. The knife on the board and the hiss of fat in the pot steadied his hands. When he turned, Ruth was studying the height marks carved beside the stove. A tin St. Jude medal hung from a nail below them. "Did children live here long?" she asked. "Some passed through," Elias said. "Some stayed till kin were found. And if no kin were found—" He tasted the broth instead of answering. Too much salt. Outside, hoofbeats thudded past the mission, then slowed, every head lifted. The beats lingered in the mud beyond the shuttered window. A harness jingled. Someone cleared his throat. Then the horse moved on. Micah breathed again. Ruth did not. Elias set down the ladle. "Who was that waiting for you?" She stared at the stove door. "A man from the rail camp near Silver Wash. Buys boys for slag hauling and girls for kitchens. He said if we weren't claimed by tomorrow, he'd claim us." The room went very still except for the rain. "What's his name?" Elias asked. "Pruitt." Elias knew the name. "Ezra Pruitt bought hunger cheap and sold bones dear. Not this time, apparently." Ruth reached into her soaked dress and drew out a folded paper sealed with muddy thumbprints. She did not offer it. Elias took one step and she stepped back. "It's from Father Tobin," she said. "He wrote before he died. Told us if trouble came, bring it to Elias Vane and no one else." The storm seemed to lean in around the house. Elias had not heard that name spoken with trust in 11 years. He held out his hand. After a long moment, Ruth gave him the letter. Tobin's cramped writing crawled across the wet page. "If these children come to you, I ask what no man has the right to ask another. Open the door you closed on yourself. The fire was not yours alone." At the bottom, under the priest's signature, was one more line. "Harlan Creed knows where the money for St. Agnes disappeared." Elias read it twice. The stove popped. Wind struck the shutters hard enough to make Anne whimper. The missing orphan fund might have kept St. Agnes open, fed these children, and spared them men like Pruitt. He glanced at the children by the stove and felt the room shift around him, as if the mission had waited for witnesses, not closure. A sudden pounding hit the front door, 3 blunt knocks, slow and certain. Then Harlan Creed's voice came through the wood, calm as a coffin lid. "Elias," he called, "I know the children are in there. Open up, and let's settle this like civilized men." The first thing Elias did was move the children out of sight, not because he meant to surrender them, because a man who let his enemy count what he loved was already half beaten. "Back room," he said quietly. Ruth gathered Anne. Micah reached for the stove poker before Elias could speak. The boy's hand trembled, but he kept hold of it. Elias almost told him no, then thought better. He nodded once. Micah took up position beside the pantry door, all sharp elbows and fury. Another knock rolled through the mission. Dust trembled from a ceiling beam. "You'll wake the saints," Elias called. "Dead men don't wake," Harlan answered. "You know that as well as I do." Elias opened the top half of the door and kept the lower bar in place. Harlan Creed stood in the rain under a slicker, Deputy Sorrell behind him. And farther back waited a wagon with iron-ribbed sides and 2 swinging lanterns. "Bad night for business," Elias said. "Business doesn't wait on weather." Harlan smiled without warmth. "Those children belong to county authority now. Pruitt paid the placement fee this afternoon. Children ain't calves." "No," Harlan said. "Calves fetch more." Old temper stirred under Elias's ribs. He had spent years hammering it flat at the anvil, but Harlan always knew where to strike. "Come back with the judge," Elias said. "Judge Bowen is in Santa Fe. You know that too. The law in town falls to me until Sunday." Harlan's gaze slid past Elias's shoulder into the mission. "Unless you want folks saying you stole county wards." "Folks say many things. They'll say more by morning." Rain and horse breath filled the pause. Harlan leaned on the frame as if this were a porch visit instead of a siege. "I heard something else," he said. "Heard Tobin left papers." "Dangerous thing. Papers in the hands of a man who drinks alone and talks to no one." So that was the deeper bite. Elias kept his face still. "Tobin left prayers and overdue bills." "Then you'll have no objection if I search the place." "I do." Deputy Sorrell shifted. Leather creaked. His thumb brushed the strap over his holster. Harlan sighed. "You're a coffin maker with a ruined shoulder." "I'm a banker with signed authority. Choose carefully." Elias opened the door just enough for the lantern light to fall on his scarred left hand. The knuckles were white around the edge. A ruined shoulder can still close a door. Harlan studied him, then stepped back. "Until dawn," he said. "After that, I return with witnesses. Burn whatever Tobin handed you." He turned away. The deputy followed. The wagon groaned back down the street, wheels sucking through mud. Elias shut the door and slid the bolt home. Only then did he breathe. Ruth emerged first. "You know him?" "Too well. Will he come back?" "Yes." Anne began to cry without sound. Micah stared at the door, fury shrinking into something colder. Elias crouched beside the little girl. "Eat first," he said. Fear thinks louder on an empty belly. They ate while Elias read Tobin's note again. On the back, nearly hidden, was one more line. Ledger beneath bell tower floor. He looked toward the chapel stair. Ruth noticed. "What's there?" "Maybe trouble worth having." He climbed to the belfry, found a loose board beneath the bell rope and pulled free an oilcloth packet. Inside were ledgers stamped with Creed's bank seal and a false deed transfer for the mission land. Ledgers.Creed had siphoned donations, county allotments, repair money and food funds for years. Tucked inside was an unsigned transfer, granting mission land to Creed's bank in settlement of invented debt. Tobin had been fighting him quietly. When Elias came down, Ruth was standing where the lantern light hit the floorboards. She had not waited to be told anything. "That's why he wants us," she said. "Partly. If there are no children, there's no orphan mission. If there's no mission, he takes the land." Elias looked at her. "Smart, quick, already too familiar with the arithmetic of cruel men, yes." She looked from Micah to Anne. "Then we leave before dawn and put those papers in a judge's hands. The road's watched. Then we make him chase the wrong trail." Micah finally looked up. "I can do that." "No," Elias said at once. The boy's face hardened. "I ain't dead weight." "I didn't say you were. You thought it." "Men always do." Elias said nothing. He took the poker from Micah, then pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle from a shelf drawer. Inside lay a soot-black sheriff's star, Ruth watched his thumb move over it. "You were law?" Briefly. "What happened?" The mission seemed to shrink around the question. "A fire took my wife and 6 children in a boarding shed," he said. "I saved 3. Couldn't reach the rest. The town needed blame. I let it choose me." He wrapped the star back up. No one spoke. At last Ruth said, "Then don't let him take us because of that. Choose now, not then." For the first time in years, guilt did not feel like a grave. It felt like a gate. Those words stayed in the room after the storm quieted. Elias rose, crossed to the door, and lifted the heavy mission key from the table. He turned it once in his fingers, feeling the worn grooves. Then he tucked it into his vest instead of hanging it back on the peg. "All right," he said. "We ride for Judge Bowen's circuit camp at first light. Before that, we need horses, food, and a lie good enough to buy an hour." Micah's eyes lit despite himself. Anne clutched the broken horse tighter. Ruth exhaled, as if she'd been holding air since the knock. Outside, dogs began barking. Then came the thin, distant sound of riders entering town through the North Wash. Elias went still. So did Ruth. She whispered the name like a curse. Pruitt. By the time the riders reached the square, the rain had thinned, and every sound in town carried too far. Hoofbeats clicked on stone, then thudded through mud. Men laughed too loudly in the dark, the way cruel men do when they want fear to arrive first. "Listen close," Elias whispered. "We go out the sacristy door, cut behind the graveyard, and reach my forge by the arroyo. If we split, Ruth takes Anne. Micah stays with me." "Why him with you?" Ruth asked. "Because he'll come back if told." "You won't." Her mouth tightened, accepting the truth because there was no time to fight it. The first fist hit the front door like a mallet. "County business," a voice shouted. Pruitt, raw and nasal. A second blow rattled the bar. Elias scooped Anne up and pushed Ruth toward the rear corridor. Micah snatched the oilcloth packet. They moved through the dark chapel, while wind moaned through the cracks. Behind them, Harlan's calm voice joined Pruitt's. "Easy with the hinges. I want the place standing till papers are signed." So the banker and the buyer had come together. That told Elias more than either would have admitted in daylight. He kicked open the sacristy door. Night air slapped cold against sweat. Wet sage and grave dirt rose around them as they hurried through leaning crosses and mesquite shadow. "They found the front," Micah hissed. "Move." They ran. A lantern beam swung across the cemetery wall. Elias shoved Ruth and Anne behind a broken angel statue and dragged Micah down beside a tomb curb. As a rider passed beyond the fence, Anne muffled a cough. The rider turned. Elias felt the cold grip of his revolver and held still. Anne muffled a cough against Ruth's shoulder. The rider turned toward the sound. Then the church bell above the mission boomed. Once, twice, 3 wild blows, crooked and urgent. Every horse in the square jerked. Men shouted. Another bell strike rang out, followed by a boy's voice screaming from the belfry, "Fire at the bank!" Micah grinned in the dark. Elias stared. "What did you do?" "Pulled the rope on my way out the chapel rail," he whispered. "And I lit Father Tobin's old smoke pot by the alley." Across town, a ribbon of black smoke was indeed climbing near the bank's backsheds, thick enough to panic men even if the flame beneath was small. Pruitt's riders wheeled toward the alarm. "Greed runs fastest toward its own pockets." "Now," Elias said. They burst through a break in the wall and slid down the arroyo path toward Elias's forge. Mud sucked at their boots while the bell kept hammering the sky. The forge crouched against the wash like a dark animal, tin roof glistening. Elias lit a lamp. 2 saddled horses waited in the lean-to, while Ruth filled canteens and Micah unearthed Elias's hidden Winchester from the grain bin. 2 saddled horses stood in the lean-to, already restless from the commotion. Elias lashed bedrolls and a grain sack across one saddle, while Ruth filled canteens at the rain barrel. "Micah in the grain bin," Elias said. The boy frowned. "Why?" "Because Tobin hid things there when men searched honest places first." Micah dug through corn and lifted out a long canvas bundle. Inside lay Elias's Winchester, oiled and clean. Ruth looked from the rifle to the sheriff's star peeking from Elias's open drawer. "I kept both." "A man keeps tools he hopes not to need." Before she could answer, hoofbeats ripped down the wash. Too fast. "Too near!" Elias doused the lamp. Moonlight leaked through roof slats. A horse skidded outside and a voice called his name. "Elias." Not Harlan. Not Pruitt. Deputy Sorrell. I've got no wish to drag children, Sorrel called, but Creed has 6 men with papers, and 1 judge bought in advance. If you run, the North Trail is watched. Elias opened the door a crack. Sorrel sat alone, rain dark on his coat, hat shoved back. Why tell me? Elias asked. Because Tobin christened my first boy, Sorrel said, and because my wife worked the boarding shed the night it burned. Before she died, she told me Creed's hired teamster kicked the lamp. You took blame for a town that wanted a simpler story. The words landed like a blow to the sternum. All these years, and Truth had been sitting in another man's house, too late and breathing. Ruth stepped beside Elias. Can we trust him? Sorrel heard her. Not far, he said. Just far enough. From the square, a rifle cracked. Then 2 more answered from different streets. Sorrel twisted in his saddle. They're done chasing smoke. Decide now. The choice came plain and hard. Ride south and save the children, or expose Creed tonight and risk losing them in the crossfire. Elias looked at Ruth. She saw the choice in him at once. If we run, she said. He'll do it again to others. Anne clutched the broken horse. Micah held the packet under his shirt like a second heart. Elias made his choice. We don't run south, he said. We finish it here. Ruth, take Anne to the loft and bar the ladder if anyone comes but me or Micah. Sorrel, wake the town. Sorrel gave one hard nod and spurred away. Ruth caught his sleeve. Don't do the brave thing if it's the foolish one. No, he said. Tonight I mean to learn the difference. He and Micah ran the wash toward Main Street with Truth hidden under the boy's shirt. Smoke still curled near the bank sheds. Town doors were opening. As Elias reached the alley behind the bank, he stopped cold. As Elias reached the alley behind Creed's bank, he stopped dead. Pruitt stood there with a knife at Ruth's throat. He had Anne by the arm, and Ruth's eyes, burning over the blade, told Elias exactly what had happened. They had never made it to the loft at all. For one suspended moment, nobody moved. Smoke drifted through the alley. Sparks climbed from the shed roof. Pruitt pinned Ruth to the adobe with a knife at her throat, while Anne twisted in his grip, still clutching the broken horse. Micah went rigid beside Elias. Drop the packet, Pruitt said. His quiet voice made it worse. Men who speak softly while hurting children have burned their conscience away. Elias raised his hands. The Winchester hung on its sling, too slow to reach with the girl so close. Let the little one go, Elias said, and lose the only thing keeping you decent? Pruitt smiled. His teeth flashed pale in the firelight. I know your sort. Men with graves in them. You'll do anything not to add one more. Ruth's gaze flicked from Anne to Micah to Elias. Not panic, counting. He came through the roof shed, she said. Before we reached the forge loft. She was telling him she had tried and telling him where the weak ground might be. Micah saw it too. Elias felt the boy quiver with the urge to spring. Don't, Elias murmured without turning. Pruitt heard that. Smart, the boy dies first if he twitches. Then the girl. Then the small one goes in the wagon anyway, only quieter. Town voices swelled from the street. Harlan would be there soon, ready to claim law over whatever blood got spilled. Elias needed the children alive and the ledgers public, and those needs did not fit neatly together. You work for Creed, Elias said, buying seconds. I work for Silver. Creed just has more of it. He promised you the children. Pruitt pressed the blade closer. He promised me contracts. The children are what contracts are made of, Anne whimpered. Ruth slipped a hand behind her skirt and touched the tin St. Jude medal she had taken from the mission wall, fingers closing around it like a nail. Mr. Vane, she said, eyes never leaving his. Father Tobin used to say miracles are what people call mercy when they arrive too late to explain it. Pruitt laughed once. Priests say many foolish things. So do bankers, came Harlan Creed's voice from the alley mouth. Harlan entered with Deputy Sorrel at gunpoint and 2 armed men behind him. Ash dusted his coat, and annoyance sat on his face where fear ought to have been. For all his polished talk, the banker looked strange in real danger, as though he had mistaken the West for a ledger and forgotten that fire, blood, and children refused to balance by arithmetic when Mercy finally stood up in front of him tonight in public. This has gone untidy, he said. Sorrel's jaw was split. But he still met Elias's eyes and gave the smallest glance toward the stacked water barrels. Untidy. Elias nearly smiled at the word. Town voices swelled beyond the alley. Someone shouted for buckets. Someone else yelled that the bank books were being carried out. End it, Harlan told Elias. Hand over Tobin's papers, and I'll call this a misunderstanding. You stole their food, Ruth said through clenched teeth. Harlan barely looked at Ruth. I redirected funds from a dying mission toward profitable growth. That is stewardship. You bought a new piano for the saloon, Micah spat. One of Harlan's men barked a laugh before catching himself. The laugh from one of Harlan's men mattered. Shame is a hinge. Once it creaks, it can swing wide. Elias drew out the packet. Ledgers, land fraud, signatures. Enough to hang a banker from his own balcony if honest men read them. Then they won't, Harlan said. He nodded to Pruitt. The knife began to rise. Ruth moved first. With a motion so small it looked like a flinch, Ruth drove the edge of St. Jude's medal into Pruitt's wrist. He cursed and loosened. She dropped, taking Anne with her. Micah hurled the iron stovebolt he had hidden in his sleeve into the lantern by Harlan's boots, and flame leaped across the spilled oil. Elias lunged. Elias hit Pruitt high and drove him into the wall. The knife sliced Elias's arm. Sorrel rammed backward into Harlan's gun hand, spoiling the shot. Another bullet smacked mud inches from Anne. Everything broke open at once. Ruth dragged Anne toward the drain. Micah kicked Pruitt's knee from behind. Elias battered the knife wrist against the wall until bone cracked. Pruitt headbutted him, and they crashed into cinders and wet clay while Harlan shouted about thieves and order. Pruitt clawed for the dropped knife. With his left hand, Elias got there first. He pinned the blade to the ground between them, steel trembling inches from Pruitt's throat. Here it was again. Kill the man and lose something forever, or spare him and risk the rot spreading. Pruitt saw the hesitation and grinned through blood. There he is, he rasped. The man who can't finish a fire. A child's hand touched Elias's wounded arm. Anne, eyes huge, held out the broken wooden horse. Scars mean it lived, she whispered. The words cut truer than the knife. Elias drew the blade back from Pruitt's throat and slammed the hilt into his temple instead. Elias pulled the blade away from Pruitt's throat and slammed the hilt into his temple instead. Pruitt went limp. Across the alley, Ruth stood facing Harlan with the ledgers in one hand and the broken metal chain in the other. Ash streaking her cheek. You wanted witnesses, she said. Dry Hollow had them now. The alley mouth was full of townspeople, shopkeepers, Miners, the schoolteacher, 2 vaqueros, Widow Garst, old Mrs. Baines. They had seen enough. Harlan looked from the crowd to the ledgers, and for the first time that night, fear showed plain on his face. Yet danger still breathed. One of Harlan's men had slipped behind the crowd with a rifle aimed at Ruth's back. Elias saw it, so did Harlan. Neither had time to shout before the trigger began to tighten. The rifle shot cracked across the alley and slammed the night apart. Ruth spun, but Elias was already moving. He hit her sideways into a mud barrel as the shot tore through the place where her chest had been. Water exploded over them. Deputy Sorrel fired once. Harlan's rifleman dropped near the alley mouth and did not rise. Then silence came strange and short, broken only by the pop of burning wood and the hiss of water on flame. Elias pushed up on one elbow, pain pounding through his cut arm and ruined shoulder. But Ruth was alive beneath him, coughing mud and river water. You all right? He asked. She swallowed, nodded once, then looked past him. Finish it. Harlan Creed had backed against the bank wall. Whatever polish he carried in daylight was gone now. Still, his hand crept toward the pistol at his waist. The townspeople saw it. No one moved to help him. Elias rose, took the ledgers from Ruth, and walked toward Harlan through smoke and firelight. You stole from children, Elias said. Harlan licked rain from his lip. I managed risk. That mission was dying. Tobin was sentimental. Pruitt was useful. And you were easier to handle than the truth. Maybe once that had been so. Not now. He stopped 3 paces away and tossed the ledgers at Harlan's boots. Pages spilled through mud and ash, every theft plain in the firelight. Pick up a lie if you can, Elias said. Harlan drew. Ruth moved before fear could. She hurled St. Jude's medal. The tin disc struck Harlan's knuckles as he cocked the pistol. His shot tore into the bank sign overhead, and the sign crashed across his shoulders. Sorrel kicked the gun into the mud. Enough, the deputy said, pressing his revolver to the banker's temple. Harlan looked up at the ring of faces. Shopkeeper, widow, schoolteacher, vaqueros, borrowers, mothers, and found no one willing to lend him silence anymore. Read it, Mrs. Baines called. Pointing at the ledgers, Miss Calder stepped forward. spectacles flashing, gathered the ledgers, and began reading aloud. County orphan allotment withdrawn, meal funds withdrawn, blankets never bought, medicines never ordered, mission roof repairs billed twice, never made a transfer of mission land in settlement of fraudulent debt. By the time she finished, even the fire seemed quieter, as if listening. Harlan tried once more. You think this changes anything? The judge takes weeks. Papers vanish. Witnesses forget. Not this time, Sorrel said. Sorrel pulled a pair of cuffs from his belt and snapped them around Harlan's wrists. The click carried clean and final through the alley. 2 miners rolled Pruitt over, bound his hands with bucket rope, and dragged him clear of the flames. The rest of the night became labor. Bucket lines passed from well to shed. Men beat sparks from roofs with wet blankets. Women counted the children twice. Miss Calder wrapped Elias's arm while Micah retold, with swelling pride, how he had rung the bell and nearly started a righteous war. Anne fell asleep with the broken horse under her chin. Ruth refused a blanket until Anne was covered first. Dawn found Dry Hollow smoked, muddied, and awake in a way it had not been for years. Judge Bowen arrived by noon with marshals, drawn hard and fast by Sorrel's rider and the town's sworn statements. He read the ledgers, took Harlan and Pruitt in chains and placed St. Agnes under court protection until trustees could be named. And the children? Ruth asked. Bowen looked over the 3 siblings, then at Elias. That depends, the judge said, on whether anyone in Dry Hollow means to keep the door open. A murmur passed through the people there. Miss Calder offered schooling. Widow Garst offered linens. Mrs. Baines offered hens. Sorrel offered lumber. One by one, the town laid down small acts like planks over a washout. Ruth watched them in silence, and something guarded in her face eased at last, not into innocence, which was gone, but into belief that a house could hold without owning the ones inside it. Elias listened, chest tight in a new way. Not fear. Not exactly. He reached into his vest and drew out the heavy mission key. I closed this place once because grief made me think emptiness was safer than hope, Elias said. I was wrong. If the court allows it, I'll keep watch here until a better keeper is found. Ruth looked at him long and hard, measuring whether promises and men were equally fragile. Then she stepped forward and placed the St. Jude medal, newly restrung on thread, into his palm. Keep the door open, she said. I will. The judge cleared his throat. Then let the record show St. Agnes remains active under provisional guardianship of Elias Vane, witnessed by the town of Dry Hollow. Weeks passed. Then months. The mission roof was patched first, then rebuilt proper. Elias hung a new bell rope, where Micah could not reach it without permission, though the boy learned anyway. Miss Calder turned one wall into a slate board. Widow Garst taught Ruth accounts. Anne carried her broken horse everywhere, until Elias carved it a new leg from mesquite and burned a tiny star into the saddle. Change showed in Elias through smaller things than speeches. He stopped eating alone. He lit 2 lamps at dusk instead of 1. He nailed the blackened sheriff's star inside the forge, not as power but as truth returned to light. On winter nights, when children from passing wagons slept in rows under patched quilts, he no longer heard only the old fire. He heard breathing, laughter, and spoons on bowls. Years later, travelers passing through Dry Hollow would ask about the bell above St. Agnes and the children racing across the yard. Someone would always tell them the same thing. 3 soaked orphans knocked on the right door, and a man who had lived like a closed house chose to open. And every evening, when the last light turned the desert copper and the mission windows glowed against the blue, Elias would lock the gate, but never the front door, while 3 carved names on the porch beam caught the sunset beside a little wooden horse standing whole again.